Good evening and welcome to Under the Hood. It is Tuesday, April 25th, a very busy time in the sports world. I'm Eli Karp, host of Under the Hood and editor-in-chief of Throw the Flag Sports. And tonight on the panel, we have Erik and Happy, a nice small group. Got a lot to get through. If you're watching, please submit your questions to the chat. We are happy to answer them and drive our discussion. And we're happy to have you along tonight. And we're going to start with the NHL playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, what I view personally as the best playoff there is of the four major sports. I think that the jump from the regular season to the playoffs is the most apparent in the NHL. It just is for some reason. It's hard to put your finger exactly on it, something tangible. For me, it's just the intensity that it picks up. And I think Ray Ferraro said it really well in Game 1 of the Rangers-Canadiens series when Tanner Glass scored the game-winning goal, which was 1-0. Or the game was 2-0, but he scored the first goal midway through the first period, and Ray Ferraro said, "You know what? Playoff hockey is so great because it only takes one moment to be the hero." And that's really what it's been. And the Stanley Cup playoffs, even though no series went 7 games, which I am shocked about, it was one of the most entertaining non-7 game group of series that you're going to find because a record 18 games went to overtime. That is crazy. I think it was on the NHL's Instagram page, actually. They have the exact percentage. Let me see if I can pull it up. And one stat I remember from the Rangers-Canadiens series, 96.5% of the minutes played in the 6-game series were played within a 1-goal margin. That shows just how tightly contested some of these series are. And so many things were so close to victory, and then as the same thing with agonizing defeat. Okay, so here we go. There were 18 overtime games played this series. It's a new record. 42.9% of all the games went to overtime, and 2/3 of the games were decided by 1 goal. That's competition. That's excitement. That is why the Stanley Cup playoffs, even though I'm a hockey fan more than a basketball fan or a baseball fan, that's why they are the best playoffs there are in North American major sports. So, obviously, of course, I am more than happy with the way this turned out, and that's why I'm so giddy talking about these NHL playoffs thus far, because the Rangers surprised me. And if you'd had me this time last week, I'd be in a much different mood and telling you that the Rangers never had a chance to win the series. Don't even begin with winning it in 6 and not 7 games. But we'll get to that a little later. Erik, I want to get your thoughts on the Bruins series and what you want to see, or what you're looking forward to seeing in the coming series.
Well, I pretty much predicted what is going to happen. They lose in 6, like very competitive games, all 1 goals. 4 of them went to overtime. 1 of them went to double overtime. That's just really what I expected. The Bruins, they were down injuries. 3 of their top 4 defensemen, and then they're missing David Krejci for most of the series as well. I'm really excited to see this team next year, see if they can actually get a defense resemblance for next year. And I want to see what they can do bringing up like a couple wings from the minors or something else. I think goalie doesn't have to be addressed, but I wouldn't mind if it would, because Rask is getting paid the 3rd most in the league this year. That's going to go to 4th with Bishop in the offseason. But he had, I think it was the 33rd save percentage. It was something down the ranks like that. It was very bad in the regular season. In the postseason, he actually played very well. Most of the goals he gave up were breakaways that most goalies don't have a chance on. He blew Game 2 for the Bruins, but overall a solid series. But next year, I'm excited for this Bruins team as a whole.
Yeah, and I think they definitely, if there's one player that I think came out to any hockey fans' eyes, or any Bruins fans specifically, you have a future Bruins fans, because there's this guy who played his first ever NHL games in playoff games and played extremely well, and his name is Charlie McAvoy, and he was sensational. I don't believe I don't believe he scored, but his impact was everywhere on the ice. He played huge minutes with all of the all of the injuries that happened to the defense core of the Bruins. And this guy, a few years down the road, once the Dowdys and the Carlsons and even Darren throwing a McDonough or the Victor Hedmans of the league, give this a solid 5 years, you're looking at a future Norris Trophy winner for best defenseman in the league, Charlie McAvoy. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. Happy, I'm not sure how much hockey you watched this past week and a half or so, but your impressions from what you saw.
You know what? Surprisingly, I've watched more than I thought I would. Like with the Islanders out, I really thought I wouldn't really be into it, but I just couldn't stop watching some of the games, especially I watched a lot of Ranger games. I was very impressed, and especially I think the series that I just like to watch the most was the Washington-Toronto series. Almost every game went to overtime. The one game that didn't was a 5-4 thriller that saw the Maple Leafs almost make an amazing comeback. But besides that, I mean, I like to see the Oilers do well. They're my dark horse pick at the beginning of the year. And besides that, I really haven't watched much. But I've been excited with what I have watched.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, the NHL is a league that prides itself on parity, and we're getting it. 3 of the top 5 teams in the regular season gone. And the best, if you want to call it a best series loss, Chicago was swept by Nashville. Safe to say, nobody saw that coming. I think everybody had them. I had them winning it all. I think a lot of people had them making it to the Stanley Cup final. And to see them get swept by Nashville, it was just so unusual. Minnesota, yes, they were a top 5 regular season team. I thought that they would get by St. Louis, but based on the way they played, Jake Allen played like a man possessed. And frankly, the Wild had been sputtering down winding down the end of the regular season. Not completely, impossible to see why they lost, but they were the better team coming in, and St. Louis stepped up their game. The Oilers, I will say, as a Ranger fan, which I'll get to in a minute because I've made this point before, and I will now really put it into action because step 1 of the phase has been completed. The Oilers, should the Rangers find a way to scrap their way to the East Final and continue to scrap their way to a Stanley Cup final, I don't want to see the Oilers. I do not want to see the Edmonton Oilers. This team is scary. I was really hoping that San Jose, through all their culture and class and the veterans that they had on their team, would find a way. No. Edmonton, it's no longer just Connor McDavid. He makes everyone around him so much better. They have a few viable defensemen, and then you've got guys like Leon Draisaitl who are pouring in goals, and Zach Kassian, the bruiser, the fourth-line bruiser, who finds a way to make differences in meaningful games. And overall, this team is just playing really, really confident. They're playing with nothing to lose. They're a young team, very similar to the Maple Leafs. If you are an Oilers fan or a Maple Leafs fan, you have to be very excited with the direction of your team, even though the Maple Leafs had a good chance to really give Washington more of a run for their money than they did, even though every game was tightly contested. Many went to overtime. But those two teams, Canadian hockey, at least in those 2 cities, is back. And it hasn't always been that way. And for those 2 teams to be doing well is very good for the NHL. See if we have any questions from the Peanut Gallery. We do not. Please submit them if you have any NHL related for now. And once we get to the NBA, we'll take those, and then eventually the draft, which we will get to finally. But that's pretty much the West. Anaheim took care of business over Calgary, even though every game, except for I think every single game, was a 1-goal game. Once again, there are so many 1-goal games. It's just such even competition, whether you believe it or not. So, all right. We've gotten to the East, and now I think I can open up the Ranger floodgates. We did not have a show last week, but it would have been at the time where the Rangers trailed in the series 2-1. Now, at that point, they could have been up 2-1 because they theoretically should have stolen Game 2, even though they had no business in winning it, or they really could have been down 3-0 because I think they played well for pockets of Game 1, but ultimately, the first 3 games, there were way too many defensive breakdowns. Howard Lundqvist, I think, made 54, 58 saves in Game 2, and he made upwards of 50 saves in Game 1. Game 3, I don't even want to talk about. We're just going to throw that in the trash bin because if the Rangers want any success going forward to continue with this, they are going to forget Game 3 because that was when I thought the series was over. They came back, played well Game 4. Montreal blitzed them on the road in Game 5 at the beginning. They let up a couple, but they came back. They chipped away. And the final 30 minutes of regulation plus overtime, the Rangers dominated. And usually I don't think they have a chance to win in overtime on the road because they're usually being pressed and they are staying back. But they didn't do that. This was not Game 2. In Game 5, they really went at it and they took it. And Kreider, even though he was terrible throughout the series, and Zibanejad was terrible throughout the series, until that moment, at least Zibanejad was huge. They get the break, whether they deserved it or not. I think they did based on the way they played throughout that game, that they probably did deserve a bounce. And at this point, it's bounces that go your way and bounces that don't go your way that can be the difference at this point. And so that was Game 5, and I think at that point, coming home, I think the stat is Henrik Lundqvist is now 8-2 since I don't know if it was since he played in opportunities to close out series at the Garden, and he was 7-2 before he came in, and before he came in Saturday night. And the Rangers came out sloppy in the first period, but those final 2 periods of hockey are what this team needs to play like, because that was lockdown hockey. The defense was structured. Games 4, 5, and 6, I thought were fantastically played by these Rangers, and I'm usually the first one to criticize them and nitpick. They played really well. They used their speed. They kept their structure. And Henrik Lundqvist, my gosh, for Henrik Lundqvist standards, he had a terrible regular season. And I honestly thought that he would be a liability this playoffs as he was last playoffs. But you know what? I think that he's given it one more push. Hopefully this is not every ounce left of what he has in his career, but give it now, Henrik, because they need you. But really, you look at the Revival, the defense was an issue during the season. It was an issue in last season as well, and that's part of the reason people had second thoughts about this team, myself included. Dan Girardi, once the scapegoat. We're not hearing anything about him, and that's a good thing. Mark Stahl, once a scapegoat. We're not hearing anything. That's great. Ryan McDonough, stand out in the series. Even Brendan Smith, who they brought over because Kevin Kline has been trash. He, I thought, played very big minutes. A little undisciplined, but he played huge minutes. And the guy took hits, made plays. He is the kind of defenseman that they need just to play solid depth minutes. They don't have too many. They really don't have many offensive defensemen, but they have enough offensive depth. And as long as they keep grinding there, and as long as they can see the light that when they do win faceoffs, there is hope to control the puck, control the game, whether it's in the offensive zone to keep the forecheck on, or in the defensive zone to gain possession, get a line change, dump in, and start the forecheck. It makes such a big difference. The last 5 years, the Rangers have had a terrible power play and a terrible faceoff percentage. And games 4, 5, and 6, actually the power play was great, even though it came alive in Game 7 and Game 6. But the faceoffs, they turned, and that really swung the tide of this series, I believe, in favor of the Rangers, and it gave them the belief. So there's part of my floodgate opening on the Rangers, and I've said before that this messed up playoff seeding, which I'm not usually a fan of, but right now I'm enjoying it because the Rangers don't have to go through Columbus, and if they win against Ottawa, which I think they have a decent chance to do, at the moment, I would say Rangers in 6. I'll get your guys' predictions in a moment. Just because Ottawa, they do have pieces. Craig Anderson has shown to be good against the Rangers, but I thought that playing in Montreal is harder, and I thought Montreal was a better team than Ottawa was. Ottawa is the only team in the playoffs that I've seen with a negative goal differential in the regular season. They were -2. The Rangers were like +38 or something like that. But I feel like that Ottawa has weaknesses. They play Erik Karlsson, who is probably the best defenseman in the league. They just play him too much. And if the Rangers don't contain him, they'll have an issue. But I think that they'll be able to expose that fatigue on the offensive end. And I think they're going to find a way, I think, to pull through. And I think they've been getting lucky. And the New York Post had a great article. Like, this could be something special because they're getting lucky. And they're getting the bounces, and that's what you need to win in the playoffs. And so I'm excited for where this is going. I'm tempered. Expectations always tempered, but that draw has them favored. They've been getting a little bit of puck luck. Who knows where this could go? So, let me get your opinions on this series. Actually, let's go through all 4 series. Brief overview. Washington and Pittsburgh, same deal as last year. Pretty much the same exact deal as last year, except this time Pittsburgh is the reigning Stanley Cup champions. It's a shame that these 2 teams are not meeting in the East Final, but hey, I'd rather the Rangers play Ottawa rather than those 2 teams right now. So we've got Pittsburgh, Washington, Rangers, Ottawa, Anaheim, Edmonton, and St. Louis and Nashville. Let's get these picks in so we can have our conference finals set happy. Let's start with you.
All right, let me just run through this quickly. Let's go Nashville, Edmonton, Rangers, and Capitals.
Nashville, Edmonton, Rangers, and Capitals. All right. Yeah, it seems popular. I think the West has a little more parity than the East. At least I think most people are picking the Rangers in their series.
Yeah.
It could be a split either way, whether you have Washington choking or not. But Pittsburgh's also a bit thin on the defensive side of things. No Chris Letang. And also, Marc-Andre Fleury's played pretty well, but no Matt Murray. Matt Murray, after suffering an injury in warm-ups of Game 1, didn't even get to play a minute. And apparently no good news yet for him coming back. So that should be interesting. Erik.
I'd like to say I did pick that prediction right. Predators beating Blackhawks, and I was laughed at last episode. I'd like to say hot to that. I still think they're going to continue to win the series against the Blues. They were just dominant last series. I think Edmonton's a little young this year. I think Anaheim's going to win that series. Like you said, Eli, I agree. Rangers in 6. And I still don't trust the Caps in the playoffs, so I'm going Penguins in that series as well.
All right, yeah, I'm going to agree with some certain things. I think the Rangers in 6. I'm torn on the Washington-Pittsburgh series because I so want Washington to choke. But at the same time, I so want Pittsburgh to choke, but I don't think they may not even have the defensive prowess that they need right now against a tough Washington team, a really tough, deep, physical, talented Washington offense to sustain that, and I'm not sure how Fleury's going to perform, so I am going to go with Washington breaking through to the conference final, something that they have not done in the Alex Ovechkin era. And I think that the Rangers, for some reason, I feel like they have a better chance to beat the Caps than they do the Penguins. Just the style. So I'll go with the Rangers, Caps, Eastern Conference Final. That should be fun. In the West, I'm going to go Nashville as well. I think that while St. Louis was pretty good defensively, Jake Allen stood on his head. And I think that Nashville is playing a little bit better top to bottom at the moment. And Pekka Rinne, similar to Henrik Lundqvist this year, he lost his way a little bit, and he is showing himself to be straight fire in the playoffs. Really, it's Henrik Lundqvist-esque. Both of those goalies are going through similar things, in my opinion, at the moment. So I'm going to go with, let's say Nashville in 6, maybe possibly 7, and Anaheim-Edmonton, very interesting series. I'm going to go Edmonton. I'm going to go an Edmonton-Nashville final. I'm not sure who saw that coming this year, but West Final, Nashville and Edmonton. Very interesting. All right, any final thoughts on the Stanley Cup playoffs? Any little thoughts? Oh, one more thing. Bruce Boudreau choked. We'll see if the Ducks have choked in the playoffs because they've had Bruce Boudreau and he brought his thing to the Wild. They did their thing, so he's gone. He's on the golf course. Any final thoughts on the NHL playoffs? All right, let's move to the NBA. And Erik, I think I'm going to start with you because Celtics went down 2-0 at home, proceeded to win 2 games on the road, and now the Bulls are starting to look more like the Bulls during the regular season. Both teams have found their way a little more. Obviously, the emotions that might have settled a little bit for the Celtics and Isaiah Thomas after the passing of his sister, the unfortunate event, but also the loss of Rajon Rondo. That was huge as well. I didn't really see where he got hurt. I wasn't watching the game at the time, but it seems like since that news, it's just been a complete, like, the news was taken after Game 2. They were still flying high, and it seemed like that just deflated them before Game 3 even started.
Well, yes, that was a huge point in turning that series. I don't know how much you watched in the first 2 games, but it was god awful watching Robin Lopez literally look like David Robinson out there against 5th graders. It was literally disgusting. In game 1, he had 10 rebounds. 9 were offensive. You know how bad that is?
Yeah.
My God.
Couldn't do that for the Knicks.
That's true. That's true. But finally, within the last 2 games, they've just fallen apart. Rondo was the floor general of that team. Without him, they've done nothing. Dwayne Wade has had to be the primary ball handler, more into a shooter role, which he's not doing a very good job at. Excuse me. Jimmy Butler he's kind of underperforming. He's going to make his shots, but he's not doing anything extremely spectacular. And Marcus Smart's gotten into his head the entire series, including his quote yesterday. Something, I forget what it was. There was something along the lines of that. But Celtics, the last 2 games, they've made a lot of threes, especially in Game 3. They made 17. They're not going to do that every night, and they weren't the first 2 games either. They were bricking everything. And hopefully, this sucks, the Rondo injury, because everyone was going to write the Celtics off next year if they lost this series. And I don't think they will because Rondo's gone. But with Rondo being gone, we will win this series, I guarantee it. And we will say, oh, great job by Brad Stevens and this young team pulling over a deficit. But it's not adequate. It's not going to be legit. But Isaiah, in game 1 and 2, he looked like the worst defensive player in league history. It was that bad. Lost his sister. I feel awful for him, but he's so awful defensively. But the last 2 games, he's picked it up, and I feel much better in this series going forward.
Okay. And your thoughts on what was I going to ask you? Hold on. Just your thoughts on what else you've seen. Obviously, Golden State taking care of business and a half. They're even with Steve Kerr, and I hate to hear what's happening about Steve Kerr and his back issues and how he may not be back for a while. And really, it seems to be much worse than people once thought it once was. Some complications after the surgery. All thoughts go out to Steve Kerr, but the Warriors, they keep chugging along. They are showing no signs of any little speed bump there. Kevin Durant just came back. He looked great. So much for Portland in 6, Damian Lillard. You played well for a half at the beginning of game 1, but that would be all she wrote. So that's decided. Cavs, they never made it easy, but they're showing championship character, I think, in the process. LeBron, once again, proving there really is no one like LeBron, even though he may not be quite the MVP rate in the MVP race that he has been in the years past. There still is no one who can get it done just like LeBron. And what else in the East? Hawks and Wizards, that's back and forth now, tied at 2. It might just be a whoever wins the home game until somebody chokes type deal. And the final series in the East.
Bucks.
That's it.
The Bucks.
Oh, Bucks. Raptors. I really like the Bucks going into this, and I think they really blew an opportunity in Game 4. They let things get away from them in Game 5. We'll see. They're a young team, and they're young team overall. We'll see if they can get things back in Game 6 at home. Out west, I think the one game that I watched the most of, in between of watching the Ranger game on Saturday, was the Game 4 between Memphis and San Antonio and Memphis. And oh my gosh, I'm not a huge basketball fan because I think I don't like the NBA too much. I like college a lot more, and I think the NBA playoffs go way too long. This was a fantastic game. This was the entire team, or really it was Mike Conley and Marc Gasol versus Kawhi Leonard. But man, it was absolutely sensational. It was quality basketball. The series is now tied at 2. And see if Memphis can keep things rolling and possibly pull a 3-2 upset and see if they can finish things out at home. But I'm really growing to like. I hadn't heard anything about the rookie coach, at least this year, for Memphis, David Fizdale, and then I heard all of his ranting about the officiating, and the sense I got was that he was probably right because San Antonio is going to get the call. They're the prestigious club. And I've liked his demeanor. I liked his fight, his feistiness. I'm a big fan of this guy. And so I'm hoping that the Grizzlies can pull through. Spentano couldn't be on tonight. Big Grizzlies fan. He said Grizz in 6 to begin with, and he's sticking by that. So, well, we'll see if that's a possibility after tonight. But very interesting series out west, at least. You've got them. You've got the Clippers and the Jazz, which has been back and forth. No Blake Griffin. Rudy Gobert has come back. I think that Houston's going to finish things tonight, if you ask me, and maybe this will settle the Harden-Westbrook debate. I think it could, since you can now vote after the playoffs, not just the regular season. And that's it. So, of the series remaining, you guys, do we all have Houston moving on? It's a 3-1, and they're at home. Yeah, we're all of them moving on. What do we think with this LA-Utah series? Happy.
Without Blake Griffin, I just think Utah has enough talent to I think Gordon Hayward, Rudy Gobert. It's a great young team. Them and the Bucks are like these two young teams that if they could keep their young talent will be small markets, like these small market teams, but a lot of great young talent. And I think they're definitely not beating the Warriors next round, but it's really great to see this team develop if they could keep it going.
You might almost be able to draw a little bit of a correlation. You have the Bucks and the Utah Jazz, and you can say they're the equivalent to the NHL's
Oilers,
Edmonton Oilers, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Just the young talent. These teams who have dwelling before, bottom dwelling, and now they're on the rise, and they have bright futures ahead of them. Utah has been building for a couple of years, and here it is. They're tied at 2 in a playoff series with a legit chance to pull through. So we'll see what we've got there. Erik.
You talk about the Clippers-Jazz series?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the loss of Blake Griffin was really bad for the Clippers. Like, I probably would have picked the Jazz in 7 with Blake Griffin healthy, but now I think Jazz in 6 because they have, under the radar, they've become a top 10 team in the league this year. Yeah. With such young talent, all-star Gordon Hayward being an all-star, Rudy Gobert probably the best rim defender in the league, Derek Favors quietly having a legit solid season, Joe Johnson coming back into relevancy.
Joe Johnson, I forgot about him.
They just have a solid young team, and the Clippers. Chris Paul, I love Chris Paul. He's one of my favorite players of all time, but cannot get past the second round. This time we won't even get past the first round. And it's very sad for a Hall of Fame career to get kind of wasted like this.
Yeah,
it really is. All right, so let's go to this series I just touched on, which was the Memphis-San Antonio series. Back in San Antonio for Game 5. Kawhi Leonard has been, as advertised, very good, but not quite enough from LaMarcus Aldridge and Tony Parker. So to see Memphis pull through in whether it's in 6 or 7, however it goes. I'm just not sure they can do it. Happy.
Exactly. It's the San Antonio Spurs. Greg Popovich is the head coach. Kawhi Leonard is on top of his game. Like you said, I would love to see the Grizzlies pull it out in 6 or 7 games, but this team has the experience, it has the youth, it has everything you want for a playoff run, and they will move on in 7. I think it'll be 7 games. I think the Grizzlies are fighting them hard enough, but it'll be a hard fought 7.
Yeah, I just think that they've expended so much energy into games 3 and 4. They've gotten the life back in the series, but I think it might just be too much in the end, so I'll also pick the Spurs. Erik finishes out here.
I say Spurs in 6, but the Spurs are kind of in trouble. Who they play next round? The winner of the Clippers series? Or
the Rockets.
They play
Rockets.
Yeah, they'll play the Rockets. I don't know if they'll win that series because Kawhi, I still think, is the second best player in the league behind LeBron.
I think
he's just so good. He's so good both ways. But like you said, Marcus Aldridge, not getting much out of production. Same with Tony Parker. And Manu Ginobili didn't score the other night in like 20-something minutes.
I don't think he scored all series.
He's just, he's non-factor.
So I don't think Kawhi's the best player. Popovich is the best coach in both of those series. But there's just not getting much help. I think they'll win this series, but I don't think they'll win next series.
Would we possibly see Mike D'Antoni making a conference final? Is this what we're saying? Is this what we're implying? That Mike D'Antoni, former coach of the Knicks and the Lakers, disaster right now in Houston, is going to make a conference final?
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the East, and so Hawks Wizards. Not too familiar with either of these teams. They don't seem like they offer any one thing in particular besides John Wall. Happy, your thoughts?
I don't think I've watched a minute of this series, but I'm just gonna go with the Wizards because John Wall.
All right, Erik, you there?
Yes, I'm here. 1 second.
Yeah, your audio is there.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I would still go Wizards in 7. Hawks have really surprised me. They're a really tough team to play against. They always get the Celtics problems. But Dwight Howard really played well last night after having a mediocre series. I think he had 18 and 14 last night.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can still be a force.
He has been under the radar this year, definitely.
In the NBA, most of the times, if you have the best player, you win the series. And John Wall's the best player, so I'm going Wizards in 7.
It'd be nice to see Scott Brooks try to make it a little deeper. I thought he did a pretty good job in Oklahoma City. Sorry he couldn't get the job done, because I think every day there's got to be something on social media where it's a meme or some kind of blurb put out where it's a Russ and a Harden and a KD picture, whether it's the three of them or just Westbrook and Durant. How did they not win a title? It's like, really, how did they not do it? I know that Russ was probably at a couple of years ago, even last year, he's probably about the same level as now. Maybe a couple of years ago, he was 95% of what he is now, but he's getting much more time and ball time now than he did then. Harden probably wasn't as good then, but then it's same deal as Westbrook. Now he is the show. He has the chance to be as good as he could have been. But how did they not win? It's just unbelievable. It's almost sad to think about this team, which was so close and had all the pieces. And I have no leanings for or against them, but just the franchise and the fans, how they just didn't get it done. And now it's a 2-team race for a championship. It's just, I really don't like that. And I really wish something could have been with that. So that's that. We have to clean up any other Eastern Conference quarterfinals.
Just Toronto, Milwaukee.
Oh, Toronto, Milwaukee. Are we Toronto finishing the deal, or is Milwaukee going to come back and stun things?
Yeah,
Erik.
I think Toronto's going to win 7. Let's say that.
All right.
Yeah,
happy.
Toronto in 7, but the Bucks will be back next year with Jabari Parker, and they will make a lot of noise.
Yeah, gotta remember that. I think one of my favorite things about watching the NBA playoffs thus far is hearing Marv Albert say Giannis. So that was fun. All right, so that's our playoff segments for both leagues. We're going to switch gears for a second, and believe it or not, it's in 2 days, the first round of the NFL draft. The NFL season coming alive slowly but surely. The gears are turning, and soon enough, we're going to be talking about OTAs. So I've got this NFL mock draft up. I couldn't find Mel Kiper or Todd McShay on ESPN, whether I was too lazy to really find it or I'm too lazy to pay for Insider. But this is what I was able to find. There's so much parity in this draft. A lot of people are saying Myles Garrett, consensus overall, number 1 overall pick. And then there are people like, no, I really don't think that. And then you see, because of the level of unsurety at the top, you have no idea what's coming at the bottom. And this is just making for something that is really a draft that could play out in so many ways. It's not like people are saying it's going to turn one way, and it's either it is or it isn't going to conform to that. I think it can conform in about 20 million different ways, 32 different ways if you want to keep with that number. But let me just hear from you guys a couple players that you're really looking forward to seeing drafted, and why, and who you think should pick them up, and where you think they may go. I know, at least as a Giants fan, the Giants can go in a bunch of different directions. We've heard they could go tight end, but maybe the 2 tight ends won't even be left. The top 2 tight ends won't even be left for them. They could go for an offensive lineman, but maybe they won't be the top couple offensive linemen will already be taken by then. And then you have the people saying, you never know. They could trade up and they could get a Christian McCaffrey or a higher player if they trade up. I mean, right now the roster is stable enough that they don't need to go crazy, but they do need pieces. They definitely need pieces addressed. But I don't even know what they're going to do first round. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Eric,
No.
I'm not even going to ask you about the Patriots because, frankly, they're set, so I don't want to know about their draft pick because they're picking last anyway. Let me just hear some of these players you're looking out for and who you think should go after them, or certain teams that need certain players.
Well, funny that you bring up the teams. I was actually thinking about the whole Cleveland situation because today on Bleacher Report team stream, they're saying that Cleveland has been taking phone calls about trading down that 12th pick and still keeping the 1 pick. In most years, I would agree trading down, if you're in that situation, is the right move. It worked for Tennessee last year, the year before. But in this draft, when there's so many good players all around, like even with the number 12 pick, it's in most years those players would be top 7 players. They say they take Garrett at 1. They could, if they want to go quarterback, unless they want to keep Osweiler, but I don't see why they would. You could go take Trubisky at 12, or
if Watson is there at 12, Watson could be there at 12 as well.
That is true as well.
He will be.
They could take quarterback at 12 because they don't have a bad O-line, which is the number one thing a quarterback needs. But they could also address their secondary, which is decent. Their linebackers are awful, and their D-line sucks. They don't have many playmakers on offense either. So it's very interesting. I want to see what they do, frankly, within the next 48
hours.
48 hours, yeah.
Hey, Eric, it's interesting you bring that up because people are saying, do you take a quarterback number 1 overall? Do you take Garrett? It definitely seems like they want Garrett. And they have 2 picks in the top 12. They could trade out of some. They can do any number of things with that. But if they want, they can easily get a Myles Garrett, and they can easily get a quarterback. Now, maybe it's not Trubisky, but maybe it's Deshaun Watson. And honestly, in this kind of a draft where there's no quarterback that absolutely says, I'm the one, you have to get me, and I'm a cut above the rest, what's the big deal if they don't get Trubisky? They've gotten a Garrett, and they've gotten another solid quarterback who is not going to be far behind Trubisky, and they may be even his level or better than Trubisky. So if I'm the Browns, I'm taking Garrett number 1 because they seem to be sold on – they seem to want to take him. Whether it's that early or they want to trade down a little bit and see if he's still there, I would take Garrett at 1, and I wouldn't be too concerned about Trubisky at 12 because I think you're going to get a very similar caliber quarterback at that spot, or if you even want to trade down a little more as well. So, Eric, what else do you have besides the Browns? What else were you thinking about?
The Titans, really, because they're also in a very interesting spot. I think them and someone like Tampa Bay could be very interesting next year as well. Teams that were sucked a couple of years ago had number 1 and 2 picks, and now I think both of them will be playoff teams this year. They're trading down. They have 2 first-round picks as well. I think it's 5 and 15 or 16. 18. Thank you. So if they can address, they need playmakers on offense as well. Their running backs are set. They have DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. They don't have any very good receivers. At 18, you can get a Corey Davis out of.
It's so funny. That's what the NFL mock draft. Yeah. I don't know if you had that one up too.
Does it actually?
Yeah,
it does.
It has Corey Davis.
Or Mike Williams, or X receiver that falls down. I don't think Williams will fall down that far. But anyway, at 5, you could address your secondary problems because it wasn't very good last year. Plus, you let Jason McCourty go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. 2 very interesting moves today, or 1 very interesting move today, 1 headline-making move, and then 1 interesting rumor that seems to be not too far behind in the headlines. 1, Adrian Peterson is a New Orleans Saint.
Wow.
Interesting decision. Makes somewhat sense for the Saints. They have a good O-line. They add more pop to the running game. It can't really be looked at as bad from their perspective. But for Adrian Peterson, who repeatedly said that he wants to go to a contender and take less money, he didn't take a lot of money. It's 2 years, $7 million from what I heard. Why go to the Saints? You're not going to win a championship there in the next 2 to 3 years. Drew Brees is still Drew Brees. Drew Brees is going to put up points. But this is not a championship caliber team. This New Orleans Saints team is not going to contend for a championship. I just don't get from that side of the argument. I don't get it from Adrian Peterson. I think he really left that platform. Do you guys agree with me?
Yeah, I think the defense is not there at all.
No, defense. The three of us can play the linebacker core for the Saints, and I think we would fill in about just as well as things are going on there right now. Now, and then the move that rumors now are coming out, like Erik Blunt, the Giants. The connections have been drawn before. Possibly, would they be interested? Now there's interest, and I don't think LeGarrette Blunt is very expensive. Now, LeGarrette Blunt is a power runner, but would it really benefit the Giants that much to bring him in? It's not like their line has gotten much better. Where Happy, I'm interested to see your take. I don't think it would hurt that much, but how much better would they really be with him?
Not much. I don't see LeGarrette Blunt as any better than a Rashad Jennings would be with this O-line.
I think he'd just be. I think Rashad Jennings is a slight poor man's LeGarrette Blunt. That's it. And an extremely, extremely poor man's Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, you're not going to get really that much production out of him just because, especially with power backs, you need a line in front of them to move him into the trenches and forward. But without an offensive line that can do that, you're just going to get stuck.
Yeah, you think about it. LeGarrette Blunt has only been good on the Patriots for whatever scheme they run. LeGarrette Blunt was absolute garbage on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for some time.
Oh.
All of a sudden, he goes to New England, he gets good. We've seen this story before. I don't really know if the Giants want to invest this in him or if they want to do it very conservatively. They don't have that much cap to work with. Yeah, Happy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to have a couple of draft things I want to bring up.
Yeah.
So we were talking about quarterbacks before, and I'm just thinking some teams that maybe can take one that maybe outside the box. I'm looking at Jacksonville. Maybe new coach, Tom Coughlin's in the front office. Maybe it's time to pick up a Trubisky if he's there. Maybe you want to get Deshaun Watson. Maybe the Blake Bortles experiment is over, and I think maybe they could sneak in a quarterback pick. And I'm looking down the board. Houston doesn't have a quarterback. Look, they want to roll with Tom Savage, which I don't think they want to. I know Bill O'Brien probably wants to do quarterback. They were looking at Patrick Mahomes, I know, a little while back.
I think some of the Giants, they're interested in Mahomes.
If the Giants take Mahomes in the first round, I would not be mad. I think him.
I don't think they're looking to take a quarterback in the first round, but I think that they're looking for depth. Like teams are talking about right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they went for him or possibly a Davis Webb, your favorite local golf pro from Cal, Davis Webb.
I'm not really a fan of Davis Webb. I think there's other quarterbacks.
Well, Davis Webb he's really a depth. He's more of a value option. He's not a first or second rounder by any means.
I know. I'm thinking if the Giants do go middle 8th round, I think they should go for a guy that maybe they can use as a developmental tool. Have sit behind Eli for a couple of years, let him build up. Maybe I'm just trying to think about who's down there. I mean, you have Peterman, you have Kaya, you have.
What do we think about another guy who seems to be very polarized throughout the scout landscape and the media, the expert landscape? Deshaun Kaiser. He's such a gray area. Where does he see? He could be as talented as the top quarterbacks in the draft, or he could suck.
That's how he was in college this year. Everyone had great things going for Notre Dame, and everything just fizzled out. I do think he'll be, second round. I think Arizona maybe. He'd be another quarterback that I think could use a year or two. Carson Palmer's said this might be his last year.
Yeah, but Arizona and the Giants are in similar situations.
I do think just with the Giants, Jerry Reese did say something interesting today about how that they're not going to reach for someone. They're not going to reach for a position if they're going to take the best talent, the talent that's if it's there with their pick. Now, I don't know what that means because the last year that's hypocritical because he took Eric Flowers, who's definitely not a top 10 pick, and Eli Apple, who was definitely not a top 10 pick. But you know what? Years past, they have taken guys based just solely on talent. I know Amukamara was one of those guys that was the top 10 pick.
And he's back with Coughlin.
And I know that with Odell, that was just a more of a best talent available pick. And then I want to hop over to the Jets. I know they have lot of work to
They
do.
need a tight end as well. The Giants need a tight end, but I think the Jets are probably going to end up getting one, and the Giants won't, early at least.
The thing is, the Jets don't use their tight ends. Now,
But they need to. They need to start using a tight end.
Yeah, I think O.J. Howard would be a perfect fit for them, but you don't have someone throwing the ball. I think O.J. Howard, you don't have.
You got to catch a ball to beat a tight end as well, and nobody's really throwing the ball for the Jets at the moment. And they go for a quarterback again. There's so many options.
The Jets, I think, can pick almost anywhere, but I do think that they need to pick secondary. And there's a lot of great corners and safeties at the top of the draft. Jamal Adams will probably be taken before, but Malik Hooker is an option. Marshawn Lattimore is an option. I think one of those two players, or O.J. Howard, would probably be the right choice for the Jets. Just not quarterback. I know Rock the Barn in weeks past has been very avid about taking a quarterback, taking Watson, taking Trubisky. But there's just no point for the Jets to take a quarterback right now if they don't have a team to field around them.
Points very well made. Yeah, I think this draft is so open. It's such a deep draft. Unusual to not have the one or two standout quarterbacks. But it seems like even in the last few years, we had more standout quarterbacks last year, even though the level of talent, I don't think is that different.
I think it's better this year.
The last 2 years, like this year and last year, no generational quarterbacks that at least people have touted coming out of the draft, which is very interesting. They're just, and also you got to look at two interesting players, defensive players at least, Reuben Foster and Jabril Peppers, both testing for diluted samples and coming back. Some of it might drug related, probably. So very interesting to see how that comes back. That could address or impact draft stock, and that might end up causing them to fall to a team that maybe wasn't in a position to get them before. And similar to a Laramie Tunsil situation, hopefully we don't see that again. But he was good. No issues in his first year. It was a bad, total, terrible look for Laramie Tunsil on draft night. Yeah. But I don't think the Dolphins could be upset with what happened. Like, they really can't.
Yeah,
they like the way he's played. And frankly, I would too. Erik, anything else to add? Anything else to add on this draft?
One more thing.
Nothing really too much. No.
All right, happy. Go ahead.
But actually, one. Yeah. Go ahead.
You good? Okay. One more thing about the running backs. It's a lot of question marks going into when they're going to be taken. I think Leonard Fournette will probably be taken early, probably top 5. Christian McCaffrey, I think, would be a perfect fit for the Panthers at 8. Then you have, who's the other one? The third running back. Oh, Dalvin Cook. I think there's a lot of interesting situations that those 3 guys can get put into.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, I think just because we've talked about, I forget how to pronounce. You have O.J. Howard, and then is it David Njoku or Njoku?
I just say Njoku.
Njoku. See, those are the 2 tight ends that people are talking about.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at this mock draft, and Evan Ingram. I remember watching him a lot at Ole Miss. He is a solid option. He is not Njoku. He is not O.J. Howard. But he may be hanging around towards the end of the first round. Maybe if they somehow traded down, or if they waited until the second round and he was still there, maybe the Giants go for like an Evan Ingram type, and I could see him being a relatively successful NFL tight end. So that's pretty much all I got to add on the NFL draft situation. We'll see how this plays out. Hopefully we'll have an NFL-related guest on next week to talk about some draft stuff in the upcoming season eventually as things start to get going. But, all right, guys. Thanks for coming on tonight. And thanks for watching, everyone who was watching. And have a great night. We'll see you next week.